I regarded it as a brief, as I've been accepting briefs for many years. So did Doug Maher and Rex Wild. And the concept of a brief is that you get a job to do and you try and do it as well as you can.
The Royal Commission into the activities of the Federation of Painters and Dockers Union of Australia are now resumed. Please be seated.
Yes, Mr. Maher?
I ask that these proceedings be in confidence, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, I direct that these proceedings be confidential.
Mr. Harkin, please.
Mr. Harkin, you've already been sworn and you're still on oath.
That's correct.
What is your full name?
William Brendan Harkin.
You're a solicitor at the Commission.
That's correct.
Yes. There's some problem about the exhibits.
Yes, there has been some problem which we're attempting to rectify today.
Okay, just before you go on, Mr. Harkin, what happened on that day, as I understand it, was that an exhibit OST 41 was tendered.
That's right, sir.
Now, apparently there was some mistake in some of the numbers and
that's correct,
decided
yes.
to change them.
Yes.
Well, that means that, of course, exhibit OST 41 remains as an exhibit of the Commission.
That's right. Yes.
But what I need to do is to change the numbers as you've indicated to me.
Values, including the protection of the citizen from excesses of the state. And I think you can mount a very respectable case for the proposition that the activities of Costigan represent excesses of the state, done for the best of intentions, with the best of motives, and producing some results. But the fact that some results have been achieved doesn't necessarily justify the action, because we may pay a much greater price in the long term as far as the erosion of traditional standards are concerned.
Two cappuccino, Nick, thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
I've been living in a small flat for the last
May I?
3 years. Thanks.
Hi. How are you? Thank you, Nick.
With books all over the floor and under beds and in cupboards, and I've now got them all up on the walls and so on. But you're probably finding the same thing with the new changes.
Well, I expect them to finish this week sometime. Although I dare say it'll be another week before they do.
Well, it's nice. It's going to be nice to go back to the bar, isn't it?
Terrific.
The Senate committee that came down, and we were talking about the kind of time that people ought to do this kind of job, and I said 3 to 5 years, ideally 4. I really got some reservations about 4.
Yes, it's a bit too long, really.
It might seem unlikely, but the way of entering this organised crime maze was through here. Through this back door, through one of Australia's smallest unions, the Federated Ships Painters and Dockers in Victoria. How reluctant were you to take it on in the first place?
I wasn't reluctant. I regard it as a great compliment to be asked. I had some concerns because of the reputation of the painters and dockers, what it would mean for me to take on a matter like this, and I took 4 or 5 days to make up my mind about it.
Did you have any idea what was ahead?
Well, of course, the articles that appeared in the Bulletin and Penthouse were really talking about traditional kind of waterfront crime, the kind of things that seem to turn up in magazines every 3 or 4 years as a fill-in article. I thought I'd have to be looking at that, but I knew that the police had enormous problems in dealing with that because of the code of silence. And it's really for that reason the assumption was made at the very beginning, which was a correct assumption, that I was not likely to find out anything by putting painters and dockers in the witness box and asking them to spill the beans. And of course that didn't happen. And we made a decision at the very beginning that the only way we could hope to find out anything was by following the document trail. That had some problems at the painters and dockers because, particularly in Victoria, they've had a series of fires in their union rooms every 3 or 4 years, so that the documents didn't go back as far as they might with a more normal organisation. Nonetheless, that was the plan we decided to follow, to get to the documents and try and understand the way the union worked.
But of course you were led well beyond the painters and dockers.
Oh yes, well beyond. That didn't happen, just trying to think, it was about mid-1981 that we first got the smell that there was something related to the painters and dockers which went way beyond the kind of things that appeared in the Bulletin.
Why do you think you kept on going? I mean, you didn't have to. Your brief could have been contained within the painters and dockers. What made you persist?
It couldn't have been contained within the painters and dockers because I took the view, and so did counsel assisting me, that in order to put in a report on the painters and dockers, one had to understand what it was they were doing and by whom they were being used.
Brown file. Thank you. Right. You create a name for Brown, John. File reference is 01/999. Put in an RDoc MV B26804V, an RDoc PV Painter and Docker, an RDoc CT AMZ 123.
The police have noted in their report that he's been driving around the area in a vehicle registered B26804. The vehicle comes up registered to 2 people.
Well, here we have a man who's a director of a shelf company, which is registered in Hong Kong. We've got shipment of drugs from Hong Kong. Looks like we've got a definite case of dual identity here.
Morning, can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to open a cash card account.
Right, you sure it's a cash card account you'd like to open?
Yes, I am.
Right, can I ask you just to fill out this application form here? Just name, address.
The system which was probably the most powerful one, which is the most recent in the development, is the hierarchical analysis, in which we can put in half a dozen names, and it can tell us people who are common to those half dozen names, even if there are 2 or 3 people in between them and each of those names. That's very valuable. That allows me as a senior investigator or as the man in charge to say to my team, this is the man I think we should be looking at. Let's really go to work on him. Let's see how he's acquired his wealth and see why he's acquired it. See what the reasons are. See if there are legitimate reasons for it. Of course, one could make a mistake there. One could go into looking at somebody who has got legitimate sources of wealth and he just happens to incidentally be dealing with these people. But remarkably, I don't really think we've yet made a mistake.
To the locals, it would hardly rate a second glance. Here on the Sunshine Coast, a small fishing boat heading for the open sea is a thoroughly unremarkable event. But to a computer ticking away quietly in a Melbourne tower block, this innocent-looking fishing trip can provoke deep suspicion. And what did you find when you lifted up the rug? I mean, is it a network of organised crime?
There's certainly a network, no doubt about that at all. But not a tight network in the way in which you use it in the military sense. There's not just a general and a colonel and a lieutenant and right down the ranks who operate solely as that particular organisation. There's a lot of merging and groupings for particular activities, and then they draw apart, and the people involved in those groupings might then link up with a different syndicate for the next lot. There's a lot of underground intelligence that moves around between the people who are in that area.
You don't think that you could be guilty of overstatement?
No, I don't really. I've been a bit shocked by the kind of things I've found out. When I had been at the bar for 25 years before I started this job, and although most of my work was not in the criminal area, nonetheless, as an experienced barrister, I had a pretty reasonable kind of feel for what was going on in the community, so I thought. And then I started to see things during the Commission which really did shock me, and I had no idea how pervasive crime was in the community, particularly the crime at a semi-respectable level, the white-collar area of it.
What's an example? What shocked you?
Well, I really was shocked by what I found out about the tax evasion industry. One had heard murmurs over the years that there were schemes around, but I think I shared with a lot of the community a disbelief as to it being other than a minor peccadillo that the smarties were finding some way of not paying too much tax. And I hadn't any perception of the extent of it. And I recall that when we first got into it, and we were looking at this $2 company in Melbourne, and we got evidence of a bank account in a suburb of Sydney, and we subpoenaed the records of that account and found that $250 million had gone through the account in 3 months. Just couldn't believe it. And that was the first of... we found another man who'd, in 36 hours, on the 29th and 30th of June in a year in the late 70s, had put $800 million worth of trust strips for 36 hours. I just couldn't believe it.
And that was all illegal, was it?
All illegal, all illegal. It had the facade of legality in that some professional advisors had produced documents which on their face appeared to be legitimate until you lifted them up and looked into them, and there was nothing there. It was a shell. It was a pretense to give an air of legitimacy to what was quite criminal. I think there's a real perception in the community now that there is a serious problem and that something has to be done about it. It doesn't need to be done in such a draconian way that other aspects of the way in which we live in the society are adversely affected, but it does need to be coped with.
But if they do make a few mistakes, I mean, couldn't that well be justified by the greater good of perhaps trapping a criminal who otherwise wouldn't be caught?
I think when you get a situation where Kerry Packer, and I'm no lover of Kerry Packer, but where in his refutation of the statements about him and, you know, pushing it too far about a major source of drug financing, I think he's done grave harm to the Costigan Commission's reputation and hence harmed its effectiveness in chasing people whom it might have got. This is the thing, if you overdo this kind of fear, you will get a backlash in the community. You will get an indifference. And after all, isn't it curious that Peacock didn't make any ground at all? I don't think it was entirely due to Bob Hawke's charisma. I think it was due to the fact that people have cried wolf a lot about this. And you can get a public indifference, which means we won't put the effort into, say, fighting the heroin trade, which we should put in.
What about the MAR technique of link analysis? Is that a worthwhile one?
Well, I think there are real dangers in overuse of the computer. See, computer can follow money trails, but once you start to feed in raw material of police intelligence, I think you can get into problems of diversions. See, there's an old saying in the computer industry, garbage in, garbage out. The material that goes into a computer from a police intelligence report will come from a number of diverse sources, but very largely it comes from informants. Informants and rumours within the criminal community. Now, informants are often very varied reliability. They tell the policeman what he wants to hear. They tell a federal policeman New South Wales is corrupt. They tell a New South Wales policeman we've got something on the feds for a start, that kind of problem. And also they tell lies. Rumours within the community grow. Now, feeding just every bit of entry into a computer, which I'm afraid is happening, gives it a kind of bogus validity without some kind of analysis of its validity and reliability alongside it.
Do you accept that organised crime is as widespread as the likes of Costigan and MAR say it is?
I think crime is very widespread. Parts of it are organised, parts of it are disorganised and chaotic. The heroin trade is unhappily widespread throughout Australia, but it's quite disorganised and chaotic. I think organised crime, and I was interested, one expert in the United States saying they've given up the phrase organised crime. They now talk about major crime. It's a distraction. It gives a concept that there's some large board of directors running everything.
Well, who is financing drugs then?
the addicts at the end of the street, the middle range people, the importers bringing it in from China, the wholesalers who are successful criminals who want to dabble in buying a kilo here, 2 kilos there, the retailers. It's the metaphor I like to use about the drug trade is it's like the delta of a big river system. There are tributaries everywhere. Sometimes you block one off, then the trade goes somewhere else. But it's a diverse, confused operation. There isn't any Mr. Big.
People like Richard Hall say that there's really no such thing as organised crime. It's more disorganised crime, that you've got a great deal of parallel criminal enterprises that occasionally connect. But you certainly don't have, he says, there are no Mr. Bigs. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. There was a book written or an article, it may have been a lengthy article by an American professor a year or two ago who put forward this theory about it. All crime is disorganised. I just don't believe it. It's not true.
But by pursuing the Mr. Bigs, couldn't you be guilty of oversimplifying the whole problem?
Well, I haven't been pursuing Mr. Biggs. What I've been doing is following the trail, not with a particular person in mind as being the target at the end of the trail, but trying to find out what the facts were so that I could get some picture of what was involved. And I haven't ever said, nor have I ever found, that at the end of the trail there was a man who could be described as Mr. Big. What I have found is an organisation with a number of people in it who are playing their part in it, and with various kind of controls. But I wasn't looking for Mr. Big. I was trying to find out how it worked. But I was left with no doubt at all that there was organisation.
Absolutely no doubt.
No doubt.
You don't think that you might have fallen into the common trap of listening to too many conspiracy theories?
I don't think I've listened to any conspiracy theorists, quite frankly. That's not the way we operated. We didn't call people into the witness box in confidential session to get the latest conspiracy theory about the way in which crime was working in this country. We've acted always on evidence, and 90% of what we've acted on has been documentary evidence. And of that, I guess 30 or 40% has been financial documentary evidence. And it's been a question of following the bank account, finding within a bank account of a man who we are interested in, cheques coming from another bank account, going to that account, and tracing it through. It's a long and tedious process, but what you then get is a picture which is not based on any preconception of conspiracy or organisation, but it's hard fact, and then you draw your conclusions from it.
But aren't some of the facts that are fed into your computer based on police intelligence, which could be in the realms of gossip, scuttlebutt?
Sure, we've heard gossip and scuttlebutt. Sometimes that's only of value in terms of suggesting that perhaps a particular person needs to be looked at a bit more closely. If he's a person that we've already become interested in peripherally, he seems to have associations with people we're particularly interested in. If I was to receive some low-grade intelligence about that person, which seemed, for other reasons, to fit into the picture I was developing, we might check that out, pursue it to see whether it had any validity. Often we found it didn't, and that was the end of it as far as we were concerned. It no longer played any part in the work we were doing.
Remember that what Costigan has done is to use coercive powers in order to investigate allegations that have not always been precisely framed, where the subject of the allegations has not always been told of the nature of those allegations, and where there hasn't been a full opportunity to probe the evidence on the part of the person who has been the subject of the allegations. Now, when the inquiry is as wide-ranging as Costigan, the great danger is that traditional safeguards will be jettisoned, that there will be a move away from protection such as the privilege against self-incrimination. The justification for this is said to be that it's only in this way that we can get to the bottom of organised crime. The real question is whether this is in fact the case, whether the exercise of these powers has really made a dent in organised crime, and whether the menace posed by organised crime is so great as to warrant a departure from standards that are usually regarded as fundamental in a civilised society.
And has Costigan gone too far?
My tentative view is Costigan has. It's very difficult, as I've already said, to know without knowing fully what is in the final reports, but I think there's a strong case to suggest that Costigan has gone too far, and that if we set up a national crime authority with all the powers that Costigan would have wanted that authority to have, then we would have gone too far, yes.
Have you contributed to a new McCarthyism in Australia? Couldn't it be said that some of the activities of Costigan may well represent excesses of the state?
I don't think that's right, and I desperately hope it's not right, because as I said in the John Barry lecture, I think one of the blackest moments of American history was the McCarthyist kind of exercise that took place in the 1950s. American society is different, of course, and there are constitutional reasons why things are done in a way different to what we'd accept here, but
you don't believe that Packer was a victim of McCarthyism?
All I'll say to that is certainly not, and I do not propose to say more on this program. That's been dealt with in my report.
The accusations that he's been denied natural justice, you can't say how your conscience is in this regard?
My conscience is quite clear. But I've dealt with it in the report, and I won't deal with it further other than in the report.
You don't believe that the Costigan Royal Commission has engaged in trial by headline?
Not at all.
You wouldn't see that it was a low point of the Costigan Royal Commission, the whole Packer case, that the public might have seen it unfair that an investigation was mounted in secret against a man who didn't have the opportunity to defend himself?
I can't deal with that except at length, and I've dealt with it at length in the report, and I'll be judged by my report. Exhibits bear the numbers which have now been read out. Does that cover that particular exhibit?
That does, sir, yes.
Cabinet of files produced by the Australian Federal Police, being reports on painters and dockers employed at the Williamstown Naval Dockyard, will be exhibit Vic 6676.
Thank you.
Are there any other matters, Mr. Mayor?
You might be prepared to release the witness in the circumstances, Commissioner.
Yes, I think I'll finally release you, Mr. Harkin.
Thank you, sir.
There are no other matters.
Yes. Well, the Commission will adjourn sine die.
All stand. The hearing's now adjourned sine die.
Nobody's reading my rude notes I write about witnesses.
All your drawings.
I apologise for being late, guys. I know you won't want to hear this, Minister, but the Commonwealth car didn't wait for me. I'm not quite sure that the purpose of this is it's just more
I'm not sure what zealot means exactly. I really haven't had any great desire to keep on going for at least 12 months, and indeed at the crime seminar last year in Canberra I made it clear that I was anxious to finish as soon as I could. And even at that time there'd been discussions with government as to the desirability of a permanent body taking over my work, and I was anxious that that be done as soon as possible because quite frankly I wanted to retire to private life again and to life at the bar, and this is a different... I don't welcome public exposure.
many reports will there be?
How many volumes, you mean?
How many volumes?
11 volumes.
And can you say how many you will recommend be tabled?
I can say that because there'll be no secret about it when the report is tabled. My recommendation is that the first 5 volumes be public and the balance confidential. Let me stress it's entirely a matter for government to determine that matter, and they will determine it after consideration of the report.
Any bombshells in them?
No comment.
Crime and corruption and Costigan have been off the nation's front pages over the past few weeks. Do you think it's going to stay that way?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Did you ever get the impression that crime in Australia is out of control?
I think it's out of control now. I have to be careful about saying that because I still remain optimistic that properly organised and with a proper regard for civil liberties, a sensible and efficient attack on crime can be put together. I think we've still got time. I think what I've said in the past was that we haven't got much time, that if we allowed the present growth of crime to continue for another 4 or 5 years, we may have got to the position where it is uncontrollable. I don't think we're quite there yet, but the signs are not good.
We've got to work out a formula.
We sure do.
We've got to do the...
Have you some cake?
Yes,
I've
had a bit.
It's great. Yeah.
And then you've got to go through that other set of drawers.
Not more files.
Oh, yes, Donald's got a secret set under a drawer. Oh, yes. We thought we ought to have in the report half a dozen tear-off apologies already signed by me, and with a note that anyone who felt insulted by what was in this volume can take this as an apology in advance.
Actually, I was surprised how well that sort of sounded, the way you...
I was surprised too, because...
Yeah.
Yes, okay. No, the 31st has no significance any longer. It's Friday.
Friday's the day.
Yes, it does.